Estoliana, Zacharias. Never were there two souls less holy than that duo. They founded the most successful cult in the history of the world. 2,600 years later, their hocus-pocus promises and ridiculous edicts continue to thrive and deceive hard-working individuals, cheating them of their free will and potential in the modern world. Quincy Lucellus Amador.
Meredith zipped her jacket up to her chin and looked out over the stormy waters of the Mediterranean. She couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation, the peculiar crossroads in her life that brought her here. She was studying history, to avoid living life, her mother always said, and had stumbled upon a mysterious island with two names in the oldest history books. Its name was either Pequeño or Estolia. Satellite imagery suggested an island of considerable size, yet all historical records depicted it as smaller than Ibiza to the west. Meredith leaned toward trusting the satellite data, despite its frustrating blur. When she'd contacted Google directly, they'd informed her that permission for higher resolution images had been specifically denied by the authorities of Estolia. In her research, she felt like Alice in Wonderland, following a peculiar trail of the most esoteric clues, but nothing seemed to add up. And then she had stumbled on an old, outdated but still valid grant for an unbelievable amount of $5 million for research into the history, ecology, economy, and religion of Estolia. She sent an inquiry to the British law firm that had annexed the law firm that had annexed the original law firm. The grant itself was nearly 112 years old and, strangest of all, had been written in San Francisco shortly after the devastating 1906 earthquake. She received a response, offering an itemized list of tasks she needed to accomplish. The most peculiar requirement, however, was that she must seek out a breeder of Estolian horses, purchase one, and as stipulated by the grant's language, use no other form of transport on the island nation of Estolia. To receive the grant, she'd need to petition for a visa, take the twice-per-month ferry from Mallorca with the horse, and secure permission to stay in the palace. Proof of obtaining the visa, palace lodging, and the Estolian mount would be required. A handwritten note had been the most curious. It said,
"It would be a tremendous relief to our offices if you could obtain these necessary items. We can state that you will receive the grant if you are successful. We did further research and determined that in the interests of expediting your actions, we could forward you the attached sum, so long as you include an itemized accounting demonstrating that all monies were used in pursuit of the necessary permissions. We also require that you send us a status report within 90 days of cashing the enclosed check."
The check was for $15,000. A post-it note affixed to the check suggested that she traveled to the Zacarian stables just outside of Barcelona and asked to speak with the owner, Sebastiani Zacarian, or with the manager of the stable, Justice Albans, about obtaining an Estolian. It took 18 days before she could fly out to Spain, and when she did, she was excited by the correspondence she had. The manager of the stable was very cordial to her and suggested that she stay at a nearby hotel. She was glad that they were able to accommodate her, but she was also nervous about the coming interview. Everything she learned about the horses and the ranch told her that even though they had horses for sale, they might be unwilling to sell her any despite the money she had. After another couple of minutes staring out at the stormy sea, she turned around and went back into the hotel. She had to dress the part, but she had no idea what that meant. She donned a pair of jeans with a flowing blouse. When she was ready, she went down to the lobby and waited for the taxi she ordered. Once the taxi reached the large gates, she stared at the horses in the fields on either side of the long, impressive drive leading to the main buildings. They were gorgeous, pregnant mares, majestic stallions. She found herself hoping that she would be able to become the owner of one of these beautiful animals. The driver stopped and opened the door for her. With a wink, he took the money she offered and promised to return to get her if she texted him. Taking a deep breath, she turned away from the taxi and saw that a couple of men were just opening the door and stepping out.
"Meredith Palmer?"
The shorter man inquired. She nodded.
"I'm Meredith Palmer."
She smiled and stepped forward. A tall man stood next to a shorter, much older man, and when she climbed the steps, the shorter man turned to the taller and said,
Darren, I should like to introduce you to a new client. This is Meredith Palmer. Meredith, this is one of my cousins, Antiochus Kederin Zacharian. He goes by the name of Darren.
She extended her hand to the man she was introduced to.
Please call me Mary.
She flushed when he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed the backside.
It is indeed a pleasure to meet you, Mary. I would also be honoured if you would call me Darren. You have become acquainted with my cousin Justice?
She nodded.
I know that you are interested in an Estolian.
Justice said to her, gesturing for her to descend the stairs and then leading her around the building.
I was a little bit confused by your correspondence. You were not exactly clear on your purposes. Were you interested in breeding them, or were you looking for a steed for eventing or for dressage?
She stopped and looked from the short to the tall man and flushed.
I am embarrassed to admit it, but I've actually never been on a horse in my life. I have always been fascinated by horses and was crazy for them as a child, but I never had the chance to be near one. I am now trying to do some research on one of the island nations in the Mediterranean, and I discovered that there is a grant that is available that will fund my research entirely. However, it has the most peculiar conditions. One of them is that I obtain an Estolian. Clearly, I'd have to learn to ride as well, though I've heard that in certain circumstances, with the right mount, they are a dream to ride, even for a rank novice like myself.
Both men were staring at her in surprise.
You have never been on a horse, and yet you are considering buying an Estolian? Even the least expensive ones are extraordinarily expensive.
Justice said.
I was given your name and forwarded $15,000 to use as a down payment. I have no time limits. Is it not possible you might have a mount for me?
Justice looked very negative, shaking his head. Before he could say anything, the other man said,
It is only fair to show her those horses who have not yet been sold, Justice, is it not?
The two men looked at each other for some time, as if some message was passing between them. Finally, he nodded. Turning to her, he said,
Selling an Estolian is more than exchanging money for an animal. The horse must like the new owner. If any of our horses looks like it is interested in you as a rider, then we will proceed from there.
Justice gestured for them to continue. In about 5 minutes, they approached a large building. Inside, an indoor arena opened before her.
A whisper on the ocean breeze, a secret held by ancient seas, two names upon a faded shard, a curious and beating heart. One heartbeat strong, a human soul, and a Estolian glorious deed, faithful mount for souls deep need. Two minds entwined, a single aim, igniting life's eternal flame. This sacred, lasting, shared bonding.
I have often wondered if individuals who lived during the so-called Dark Ages felt as if the title was appropriate. Did those who lived in the Golden Age feel as blessed as the name implies? Throughout history, I am certain there have been individuals, townships, and even nations for whom such titles would have been the opposite of how they saw themselves. As one who lived through the tipping point years, I still find myself wondering what name I would give to my own time. Those were, to be sure, some of the darkest years for humanity, yet all the same, they held some of my most glorious memories as well. Harmon Zakarian, Personal Journal.
If you will proceed to the center, I will bring a few of our horses to you.
Justice said. After he left the building, Darren smiled at her and asked,
You mentioned that you are trying to obtain a grant. Can you tell me something about it?
Self-consciousness prickled under her skin. Her mother always dismissed her research as a waste of time.
I've been studying the history of the Mediterranean, particularly the region west of mainland Italy, Sardinia, Corsica, and the Balearic Islands. It has fascinated me since I was a child when one of the neighbors told me about his childhood on Minorca. I studied history in college and was considered something of a child prodigy. When I started working toward my master's degree, I knew I wanted to specialize in that area.
You seem quite young to have your bachelor's degree already,
he observed. She shrugged.
My mother thinks I'm so fascinated by the past that one day I'll turn around and find I'm 50 years old with nothing to show for living my life.
She sighed at the remembered censure.
Anyway, one of the things I noticed while doing my research is that there's an island that only appears on older maps, and even then, rarely. Often, it's omitted altogether. It's called Pequeño on some maps and Estolia on others. What's strange is that when I tried to zoom in on the island using Google Earth, the map refused to resolve. The image stayed fuzzy, as if the satellite blur were deliberate. When I inquired, they told me the authorities in Estolia had refused to authorize more detailed imagery.
You actually contacted Google and got a response?
He asked.
Oh, yes.
She said.
It's an extraordinarily fascinating place, worth the effort to contact Google. I learned that despite several heated conflicts involving neighboring islands, it appears Estolia has never been involved in any of them. It's like it's invisible. It's almost impossible to find out anything about it. During my investigation, I discovered a man named Quincy Lucellis Amador, who lived in San Francisco in 1906 and was injured in the earthquake. He was extremely wealthy for the era and decided to fund investigations into Estolia's peculiarities. He put nearly all of his money into a special account and tasked a British law firm with overseeing the fund and dispersing grants to anyone willing to meet his conditions. At the time, it was worth $200,000. He was, as I understand it, a brilliant man, a genius even, who understood the legal workings of both Great Britain and the United States. He made certain that if the first law firm went out of business, another would be brought on, and so on. They are actually paid a £20 retainer each year. They're obligated to oversee the grant until they disperse it.
And getting an Estolian is part of the conditions of the grant?
He asked. She had done it again. She had a tendency to dive into the minutiae of any question asked, rather than focus on the surface details. A strange wrench of disquiet twisted inside her. She did not want this man to think she was boring, and it was probably too late to change his perception. She nodded and focused her attention on her answer, trying to be as brief as possible.
They seemed anxious for me to meet the conditions of the grant, but there are other conditions besides the horse.
Like what?
He asked. She took a deep breath, reviewing the conditions and reminding herself to stay brief.
They said I must obtain a visa to visit Estolia, be granted permission to stay in the palace during my visit, and use no other transport while in Estolia other than the Estolian I acquire. If I can meet those requirements, the grant will be mine.
All that, just for a $200,000 grant?
He asked.
It hardly seems worth it, given the price of even the least expensive Estolians.
Mary grinned, forgetting her earlier fears of chasing him off.
It was that much in the beginning. It's accrued quite a lot of interest since then. I don't know the exact amount, but as far as I can tell, it should be somewhere around $5 million American dollars.
He whistled.
And you need $5 million to do your research?
It's expensive to live in Mallorca or Ibiza. I couldn't find any information on the cost of living in Estolia, but if it's comparable to the other islands, I'll likely need every penny, especially if I have to support a horse.
One of the larger doors into the covered arena was pushed open, silhouetting the squat outline of Justice Albans leading a horse against the bright morning sky. Once he stepped out of the bright rectangle of light, she had a better chance to look at the Estolian he was leading towards where she and Darren were speaking. The horse was a beautiful reddish-brown with 4 white socks all the way up to his knees. When Justice was followed by several others leading horses into the arena, Mary felt the heat of embarrassed color flooding her face. These people were going to a lot of trouble, and they did not even think it likely they would be able to help her. By the time the final horse was led into the arena, 6 stood waiting, their ears pricked and eyes bright with curiosity. Only one seemed restless, a nearly pure black animal marked by a broad blaze of white that ran askew down his face, like a white hat tipped over one eye. Like the first horse, he had 4 white socks that stood out vividly against his dark coat. As she approached the line of horses, he grew more agitated, kicking up a fuss. She stopped and looked from the black horse to the others. As soon as she halted, the black horse calmed down. His only noise was when she looked his way, and it sounded to her as if he was encouraging her to select him. Deciding, she said to Darren,
I really want to look at the black one first.
As if he understood English, the horse immediately grew quieter, ears pricked forward, offering short, encouraging whinnies. As she approached, the man holding his halter stepped away. When she touched his thick neck, she knew this was the horse she was meant to have. As if reading her mind, he stepped closer and pressed his head gently against her chest. His low, throaty whickers sounded like gratitude, a quiet promise to be good. One eye, in the patch of white, was blue, the other brownish-black. She didn't look at the other horses or at the people in the arena.
I know this one is right for me.
She said. Justice directed the others to take their horses and leave the arena. He turned to her.
It appears Kamchatka likes you. The horse chooses the rider.
Keeping her gaze on the stallion, she asked.
How do we know for certain?
Darin answered.
We will put you up on him.
She wasn't very tall, and the height of his back nearly met her eyes. Her pulse quickened as she remembered how restless he'd been.
One of the reasons these horses are so sought after is that they are a dream to ride, even for a raw novice, if the horse likes the rider. He likes you.
Darin said.
So you have nothing to worry about.
Justice unclipped the lead rope from the stallion's halter and suggested.
Let us go to the stable and get a saddle.
She walked with the two men, the horse following close behind. Once they reached the stable, Justice handed her a lightweight sheepskin pad. For the next several minutes, she followed Darin's instructions as he guided her through saddling the horse and fitting the bridle. Finally, the stallion was ready. Darin stepped beside her.
I will help you mount.
In a single motion, she was in the saddle. The horse snorted, then gave a soft neigh. She wasn't sure her interpretation was correct, but she thought he seemed happy. Justice returned, leading two other horses, both saddled. She watched as both men mounted effortlessly, and soon they were back in the indoor arena. The next half hour was a revelation for her. Her mother had never cared for animals, and Mary had never owned a pet. Yet she did not think of the powerful stallion as a pet. He was a living creature who loved her.
Deity guided you here to bond with Kamchatka.
Justice said. He nodded sharply.
I sincerely hope you have the means to purchase him.
How much is he?
She asked.
In American dollars, his price is set at $62,500.
Justice said, his tone matter-of-fact. His diction was precise, each word deliberate, before he added almost regretfully,
And if you do not purchase him, we will have him put down.
Horrified, she stared at Justice. The cost of the stallion had already stunned her, but the idea that they might destroy him was unthinkable.
You wouldn't.
She whispered. Darin dismounted and approached where she was standing in front of Kamchatka. He clarified,
And Estolian horses, the best ones, are devoted to one, and only one person.
He cast a look at Justice that she could not interpret, before continuing,
Having demonstrated that most desirable trait, Kamchatka will not be put down. He would likely be put to stud.
Darin then looked at her, adding,
However, it is entirely possible that, having met you, he will pine for you and go off his feed and die if you do not keep him.
If I can obtain the necessary permissions, I will be given the grant and as a result be able to purchase him.
Permissions for what?
Justice asked, not having been present when she explained the details of the grant to Darin.
To visit Estolia, to stay in the palace.
She said blithely. Once more she saw a look pass between the two men. Darin said,
I will make a call and ask a favour. In the meantime, it does not make sense for you to remain at your hotel. Will you be our guest here at the ranch?
I wouldn't want to impose,
she said. Justice was firm as he responded.
You would not be imposing. You have mentioned you require riding lessons. For $80,000, you will be paying for lessons, the horse, and the transport to Estolia, which Darin will secure for you. Can I infer that you must put together a proposal to obtain the money?
She nodded.
I will need to do so. They want an update as soon as I've made progress. I am uncertain of the timeline for obtaining the grant.
Justice smiled at her.
No matter, for 10% of the total quoted, we will consider it a deal. If you do not obtain the grant, then I do have a few strings I could pull to try to find a situation for both you and Kamchatka. We will put the horse back in his paddock together, and then Darin will take you back to your hotel so you can pack up your belongings and come out here.
Bond awakens in this place. Two worlds converge. A whispered plea for strength and purpose. Wild
The keeper is given the gift of insight into the hearts of men and women here on earth. With the clasp of both hands, he feels the substance of a person's soul, weighs it, perceives deceit, and recognizes the dark influences that stain the soul. Through that knowledge, he renders profound judgments. Lazarus Ricardan Zakarian, Capitulo 84.
3 days later, Mary was feeling strangely unsettled, as if she had no guidance left in her life. Her passion was history, Mediterranean history, and yet she knew that if she had to give up her research or Kamchatka, she could not give him up. And even if she got the grant, what would she do with him when it was over? Sensing that she was getting worked up over things far in the future, she took a deep breath before slowly exhaling. 2 more deep breaths before she felt her muscles begin to relax. She leaned against Kamchatka's strong neck. The future would take care of itself. She would focus on the here and now. She heard voices and looked up. 3 men were approaching her where she was still working with Kamchatka. She smiled in greeting, but kept her focus on the grooming essentials she had been taught. A few minutes later, she led him into his box stall, latched the door, and turned to face them. The 3 men were dressed distinctly from one another. The first was an older gentleman with a narrow, protruding face, unfortunate teeth, and a thin fringe of yellowish hair circling his otherwise bald head. He wore a formal business suit. The other 2 looked as though they might be related. One was dressed in something resembling a monk's robe. The other was dressed all in black, wearing a crown and with a sword strapped to his side. The one in the business suit stepped forward.
"My name is Edward Westborough,"
he announced with a clipped British intonation.
"Do I have the pleasure of addressing Miss Meredith Palmer?"
When she nodded, he continued,
"I am here to verify the facts pursuant to your application for the Amador grant. Should I find that you meet all of the requisite conditions, I have been empowered to issue you a check for the first disbursement amount forthwith."
It had been only 3 days since Mary sent the application overnight express to the London office of the law firm overseeing the grant. It seemed remarkable that he was standing here in Spain already.
How?
She began.
"I received a communication from Justice Albans, manager of this stable, explaining the urgency of reaching a decision. He offered me transport to come out as swiftly as possible, and I availed myself of the opportunity."
Neither Justice nor Darren had expressed any urgency, but perhaps they were inconvenienced by her arrival and prolonged stay until a decision was made.
As I understand it, at least one of the requirements for the grant Ms. Palmer is pursuing is to obtain a visitor's visa allowing her to visit the island nation of Estolia.
The one dressed like a monk spoke. Brows raised, the lawyer nodded. His eyes were faintly bulging, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down like a misguided elevator. The swift glance from one man to the other made it seem unlikely he'd arrived with the 2 men. The monk extended both of his hands toward her. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her own hands in his.
"I am Nicodemus Luciano Zakarian,"
he said, his voice calm and steady.
"Keeper, first consul to the king, and last resort. Please call me Nico."
She was mesmerized by the intensity of his gaze and the warmth of his hands gripping hers. He squeezed her hands briefly before releasing them and turning his attention back to the lawyer.
"One of my roles is to grant visas for visitors. I hereby grant you a limited 3-month visa for travel to Estolia."
When the man wearing the crown stepped forward, Nico said,
"This is my brother, Leonidas Agamemnon Zakarian, Duke, Sovereign, and King of Estolia. Leon, this is Meredith Palmer."
The king pulled her into his arms for a hug, pressing his cheek to hers. He stepped back and said,
"It is a true pleasure to meet you."
He added, with a glance at the man in the business suit,
"I understand that another condition of the grant is that she must stay in the palace. I have already requested that the tower suite be prepared for Ms. Palmer."
The lawyer nodded decisively.
"Then I am authorized to hand over the first installment along with the paperwork that explains your obligations. Should you meet those obligations, you will receive a second check, and so on up to the 5th check.
He proffered the briefcase he carried with him.
This contains all of the particulars.
After she took it, he pulled 2 envelopes out of an inner coat pocket and handed one to her.
This is your first disbursement,
he explained.
The amount is $1.28 million, less the specified amount required to purchase and transport the Estolian stallion Kamchatka.
He passed her the second envelope, saying,
which you'll find in this envelope.
Once she took everything offered to her, he nodded to the 2 men and, with a final glance at the stallion, quickly left the stable. Silence lingered after his departure. Mary looked from the king to Nico, both watching her with quiet expectation, and realized she wasn't entirely sure what to do next. If she had understood the lawyer correctly, she now possessed $1.2 million. Justice and Darren rejoined them a few moments later.
The lawyer communicated your success in obtaining the grant?
Justice asked. She nodded. Looking down at the 2 envelopes, one bearing the horse's name, the other marked Grant, she handed over the envelope with Kamchatka's name. He opened it and looked at the contents. After a moment, he nodded crisply and turned to the 2 men from Estolia.
How would you like to transport him?
You have the 3 mares?
The king asked.
Yes, they are ready to transport whenever you wish.
We have contracted with a cargo firm to transport them via air tomorrow,
Nico said.
They will bring the stallion also.
Excellent,
Justice said.
I have a significant request as well,
Darren added.
We will discuss your request later today,
Nico replied.
We will also see you when you visit Estolia in 10 weeks.
Will the 2 of you remain here?
Justice asked.
Yes, we expect Zeb to show up at any time,
Leon said.
When he does, Nico, Darren and I must all have a conference.
Justice escorted her back to his office and encouraged her to take a seat.
I should like to acquaint you with the conditions attached to Kamchatka's purchase. I am certain there are corresponding conditions to your grant. I suggest you spend this next hour reviewing the contents of the briefcase. Make note of any questions that occur to you, even if they are ones I may not be able to answer. I will return in about an hour, and then we will go over the purchase terms together and address your questions.
That sounds reasonable.
I will have someone bring you a tray of refreshments.
40 minutes later, she heard a discreet tap on the door. The woman pushing a tea trolley into the office was extraordinary to look at. Her hair was dyed every color of the rainbow.
Are you hungry?
She asked.
Yes.
Mary said.
Great, because I'm starved. I will join you if you don't mind. I'm Kenzie Zakarian, Nico's wife.
Mary gestured to the other chairs around the large conference table. Once she started to nibble, Kenzie said,
Justice will be here, but he's running behind a little. While I might not be able to help you, I can at least try. Fire away.
Bemused, Mary glanced down at the list of questions she had organized into 4 categories. They ranged from, what product must I present at the end of the first year, to, what can I not spend the money on, and, what will disqualify me from receiving future installments? She pushed the list across the table. Kenzie looked over the list of questions and finally shrugged her shoulders.
Nico is in negotiations with the law offices that control the disbursement and is asking to have the responsibilities and remunerations switched over to him. The company overseeing the funding wants to get rid of it. If he can take over, then he'll be in a position to help you fulfill the conditions for all 5 years.
It occurred to Mary that a 5-year allocation for research into this island nation would require her to have more than 3 months on the island.
I've only been given 3 months on Estolia,
she pointed out.
You'll have your visa re-evaluated in 12 weeks. By then, you'll really know whether it's a good fit. Estolia is a peculiar nation.
What do you mean, peculiar?
Mary asked. Laughing, Kenzie clarified.
It's got some strange quirks to it. Nothing awful, but kind of weird. You may find out that you don't like it there. If that happens, you probably won't want to stay more than 3 months.
Mary tilted her head, studying the peculiar multicolored woman. After several minutes of silent observation, She voiced the thought that had been forming.
You don't think I'll want to leave, do you?
No, I don't.
Kenzie said with certainty.
I believe that Estolians are a most peculiar breed. The horses will bond with many individuals, but I've heard of the instant bonding only with those who end up loving Estolia.
She paused before adding,
I look forward to getting to know you. Nico and I live in the palace full-time. There are quite a few women our age, and we are all great friends. I think we'd all love to have someone new join our group.
With a smile that lit up her expression, she added,
We have a study group, and it occurs to me that you're a perfect addition to that group above all other things. Ria, my sister-in-law, will be tickled pink.
He came with hands both warm and kind. A whisper echoed heart to mind. He weighed her soul with quiet eyes and read her truth unspoken wise. The grant was given sweet, nothing too special. Darren is in for a treat with a glimmering auroras fulmination. He'll suddenly face full-blown temptation.
Father told me that there have been threats against him. Death threats. He suggested that Bart and I might prefer to skip the rally tomorrow. I don't want it to look like we don't believe in Father's candidacy. Rumors are so easy to start and so difficult to quench. I told him that I would not allow his enemies to capitalize on our absence from the stage. I want to tell Eros about the time I stood on the stage with her grandfather and knew he would one day be president. I know we shall be okay. Nobody would really wish to hurt my father. He will be the best president ever. Riley Carlisle, final diary entry.
In the conference room in the business building, the 5 men were meeting to discuss the situation. Nico said,
I have researched it since Darren first alerted me to its existence. It was created by Quincy Lucullus Amador. I had to do some digging, but was able to get at least part of the story.
He paused for a moment before continuing.
Percival Amadeus was the 83rd keeper of the soul of Estolia. He and his Kaylee had 1 son and 1 daughter, born 11 years apart. In the fullness of time, their daughter, Rose Medley, married Phineas Amador, and they were blessed with only 1 child, Quincy Lucullus.
Nico took a breath before delving into the next part of the story.
He began his acolyte year, but did not remain for the full term. He decided that he did not agree with the Estolian way of life, and he moved to London, and from there ended up in San Francisco. He amassed a small fortune rapidly and was considered a bit of a Romeo.
He planned to remain a playboy of sorts,
Leon said.
He turned 30 in 1906, and naturally, he met a woman who tempted him to settle down. She was his final romantic liaison. Shortly after they began their affair, he received a devastating injury in the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco. Paralyzed from the waist down, he lived alone for the rest of his life. He increased his wealth steadily over the 7 years between his accident and his death. He grew bitter, believing that Deity had let him down by allowing him to be so grievously injured. In that bitterness, he decided that Estolia was the equivalent of a cult, and that it should be exposed.
As Leon concluded his analysis, the furrow between his brows and the small shake of his head were reflected in the unsettled expressions on the faces of the men around him.
Why require the applicant to obtain an Estolian?
Darren asked. Zeb answered.
Back in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Estolians were bred more for their endurance and seat than for their loyalty. I think he stipulated Estolian because any other breed of horse would be questioned.
Nico leaned forward slightly.
I think that it is clear that Deity influenced Quincy Amador in the establishment of the grant, and in the way the grant was obscured and buried. Deity also influenced the curiosity of Meredith Palmer so that she would discover it and come here, to this stable, to obtain an Estolian.
He glanced around the table.
There were 4 other breeders she might have contacted. While all have exceptional horses, we are the only Estolian-run establishment.
His tone left little room for debate.
Darren, what do you think about her?
Darren's expression was familiar to every man in the room. He said,
I did not know if I would be gifted with the aura. Now that I have, I am frustrated by the time between seeing it and being able to act upon it. I do not recall reading of anything similar in my acolyte year.
He looked at Nico. Nico shook his head.
It is rare but not unprecedented. Knowing the temptation that you will face, it is not a good idea to remain near her.
Darren opened his mouth as if to speak, a flicker of protest in his eyes, but Nico's firm shake of the head cut him off. Nico continued.
Until I saw Kenzie's aura, I did not understand the temptation that comes to every Estolian man who is gifted with the aura. You will be challenged enough to wait 11 weeks apart from her. I do not believe that the temptation of being with her is a challenge you should be made to endure.
Sighing heavily, Darren reluctantly agreed.
What is the exact plan?
Justice contributed to the conversation.
She and Kamchatka are perfectly matched to one another.
His eyes met Darren's and they both nodded in agreement.
It would seem that we should schedule 8 weeks of dressage after 10 weeks of basic instruction.
Darren leaned forward, a quiet sparkle in his eyes already focused on his upcoming birthday.
I am willing to do my part.
What about the grant?
Leon asked.
We have been selectively releasing a small amount of information about Estolia over the last 75 years,
Nico said.
Ever since Leo and Jackie.
I believe,
Zeb said,
that we are being pushed by Deity to subject our nation to greater exposure. We must be willing to demonstrate our beliefs and our modern perspective to the world around us.
He paused, eyes lowering slightly as though studying something only he could see. When he spoke again, his voice carried a quiet reverence.
I believe that this grant, Meredith Palmer's discovery of it, and the refinement of Estolians to the point where they now are bonding to only one person, are all part of the greater plan that Deity has for us. To effect change in the world, we must become better known.
Is there not risk involved in this?
Leon asked. Nico inclined his head, thoughtful rather than hesitant.
We must make a change in this world. If we remain sheltered from the nations of this planet, Deity has proclaimed that the forces at work will destroy our ecosphere. What victory is it if we remain unknown to most of the world, yet are undone by those who prize profit over progeny? We must make a change, and to do it, we must be more visible. Deity will provide for the children of Zacharias when his children are willing to keep his promises and receive the blessings.
So the bottom line,
said Justice as he climbed to his feet,
is that we send her to Estolia. She will receive basic riding lessons and begin her work towards the grant. In 11 weeks, Darren will fly out with plans to commence instruction in some of the finer points of dressage. He will have plans to be there for 8 weeks to train her up in the more esoteric skills. During the first week,
Justice slanted a look at his assistant.
You will not be allowed to be alone with her. Then on the eve of your birthday, you will give your soul to her.
Darren nodded, but then he frowned and looked at Justice.
I will not be returning,
he realized out loud.
If she must research Estolia, write up information about our nation, and remain for 5 years, then I am effectively terminating my time here working with you.
Do not fret, Darren,
Justice said with a grin.
If you will recall, it was always assumed that you would find someone and keep your birth blessing by consummating the union on your birthday, followed by your elder year of study in the temple.
Nico added.
You should make plans to take on your elder year once you are done with your seclusion. Mary can take part in the instruction that Rhea is spearheading as part of her research for the grant. It feels...
He paused to grin happily.
Like many of the intricate strands of our life in Estolia are coming together to make a tapestry of great beauty.
It was an ordinary day.
What is the most exciting aspect of being the breeder of epic pharaoh?
Nate Coleman repeated the question back to the reporter.
I guess
He said, scratching his neck.
it was just meant to be. Right time, right place, right bloodlines.
He shrugged as if eloquence was less attainable than a champion stallion.
I heard that you had a lot of excitement when you brought Pharaoh's dam home to your stables.
The reporter asked, as if hoping to extend the interview. Nate's eyebrows bunched together, and he looked completely perplexed until, suddenly, enlightenment.
Oh, yeah. Someone dumped a kid in my stable the next night. Made me realize I had to get a better lock for my gate and for my stable door.
Interview with Nate Coleman.
The next day was hectic. Kamchatka was not about to allow them to load him onto the horse van until finally Mary personally led him aboard. After a short conference between the different men, it was decided that she should travel with the stallion. She had been told that after 10 weeks in Estolia, she would get advanced lessons from Darin. Mary sat in front of the vanity mirror and looked at herself as she brushed her hair. She felt as if she had spent 10 weeks in paradise. The number of things she had learned about Estolia was staggering. She was informed that the grant was taken over by Nico and that he would be working with her. While she ran the brush through her hair, she recalled that interview.
I have great discretionary freedom. There were very few constraints on this money overall.
He smiled gently and added,
What mattered to us here in Estolia is that we do not have anything published that leaves our faith and lifestyle open to incorrect interpretation. We wanted to have a say in anything you publish. We would like to wait until the end of the 12 weeks, but I can say now that we will be extending you a contract for the full 5 years, so long as we can all come to an agreement.
Mary spent more than half of her time in Estolia working with Kamchatka. He had rapidly become the most important living creature on the planet to her. She was ready to graduate to more elaborate riding and looked forward to the chance to learn more challenging material. She was assured that Darin would be with her by the end of the week. One morning, she had just finished riding when she saw a carriage draw up next to the royal stable where Kamchatka had his box stall. She finished the maneuver she had been taught to use and then dismounted. Normally, Mary would cool him off and rub him down, grooming him prior to bedding him down for the night. Eloise, the stable girl who was assigned to help her, came up to them.
You must greet those arriving,
Eloise explained, first in Estolian and then in English. Eloise seemed as dedicated to teaching Mary how to speak the language as Mary was dedicated to learning how to ride.
I will take care of Kam.
There was little point in arguing. She patted Kamchatka's neck before turning to walk toward the older couple as they stepped down from the carriage. She recognized Nico and wondered who the other couple might be.
Mary.
Nico wasted no time.
I would like to introduce you to Lazarus Ezekiel Zakarian, former keeper of the soul of Estolia and second consul to the king. Uncle Zeke, this is Meredith Palmer.
Enchanted to meet you, my dear.
His voice was firm, warm, pleasant. He turned to the woman by his side and said,
Mary, I'd like you to meet my Kaylee, the keeper of my soul, the woman who is quite literally everything to me, Kadarin Cicero Zakarian. This is Meredith Palmer.
Kadarin Cicero!
Mary exclaimed, staring at the woman in shock. Nico looked from Mary to Kadarin to Zeke.
What is it that I do not understand?
He asked.
Your name is really Kadarin Cicero?
She asked. The curly-haired woman nodded her head, saying in a voice barely above a whisper,
Why is my name so significant to you?
My mother's long-lost sister, snatched as a newborn. That was her name.
Mary looked at her, studying her features, seeing in her mind's eye the photograph of her grandmother when she was this woman's age. Nico looked from Kadarin to Mary to Zeke.
We should return to the palace,
he said. He and Zeke helped Kadarin into the carriage. The four did not say anything on the short ride to the palace. Mary could not believe she discovered the missing link from her mother's family on a tiny island on the other side of the world. When they were in one of the lovely sitting rooms of the palace, Zeke took charge of the conversation.
If you could explain to us what you know.
Mary told them the story. They listened quietly while she shared everything she knew.
Connections made, a life made whole, scars erased from her wounded soul.
The riot of brown curls sported by the pregnant woman were striking, giving her a playful look. She looked up at her husband after the doctor stepped out of the room.
I didn't believe it could really take hours to give birth.
Are you in any pain, Carol?
Her husband asked. He distractedly ran a hand through his overlong red-orange hair.
They gave me something.
She assured him, grabbing his hand.
At least we can talk about names.
You're sure about the name we chose?
He asked.
Caterin. It's got a ring to it. Besides, making up names is all the rage these days.
She said.
Yeah, but most people are choosing names like Moonflower and Starsong and who knows what else.
The woman in the bed did not respond right away, as another contraction took her attention. Finally, she was able to say,
Those names are a product of the times more than anything. I want to make a new name up. Besides...
She hesitated.
What is it?
He asked with a grin. She shrugged and said,
Mother was dead keen on genealogy. She said that one of her ancestors had a cousin named Fleur in Perpignan, and she married some foreigner named Catero. It was spelled funny, with a Q, so I changed the spelling.
Cadarin it is then,
he said with a smile.
Caterin Cicero. He'll have to be big and brawny to live up to such a different name.
She'll wear it perfectly. I just know it.
3 days later, they were preparing to check out of the hospital, waiting for the nurse to bring them their daughter, when it was discovered that their newborn baby was missing. For weeks, the authorities searched and followed leads, trying to find the newborn, only to eventually tell the couple that they should move on with their lives. The couple were less exuberant, less ebullient, as they waited in the hospital to take their next child home. The young girl they were going to adopt was 18 months old. Her name was Molly, and she was suffering from smoke inhalation, from the fire that took her parents' lives and left her an orphan. They wanted to give their abundant love to a child, and when it became clear that Carol would never give birth again, they opted for an adoption of an older child. They wanted a child sooner rather than later. For the most part, they put their lost child behind them, except on December 28th each year. Then they would take the time to celebrate her birthday and pray that she was loving life somewhere, happy and healthy. Their imagination was all that they had.
Your mother was adopted?
Nico asked when she finished her story. Mary nodded.
Yes, she was orphaned in a fire. She was very happy growing up.
I was not abandoned by my parents.
Caderin realized out loud. Tears were running down her face.
I'm sure my grandparents would love to meet you,
Mary said.
They're alive.
Caderin looked at her husband and Nico before looking back at Mary.
Yes.
Mary said.
They are very healthy. I'm quite blessed to have them.
She had always gotten along better with her mother's adopted parents than with her immediate family.
I am sure they would visit you here if they could afford it.
We will send the jet to pick them up,
Nico said firmly.
Will you request their presence?
Mary nodded.
I will. They'll come too. I'll make sure of it.
Connections made, a life made whole, scars erased from her wounded soul. The convoluted path in the absence of light, guided by determination, led by illumination.
As I pored over the records compiled for the 87th through the 89th capitulo, I was fascinated by what I began to see. It was my mastery project to trace the intertwining strands of influence that created that most monumental period in our history. But I had literally no idea how involved the project would end up being. How was I to know, the day I declared my one-year mastery project, that I was really declaring what I would do for my entire lifetime? And yet still, as connected and codependent as those events were, there are still a few dangling strands that seem as if they should have been connected to the rest. As I write this epilogue to my lifetime study, I charge those who come after me, who take up this vocation, to continue to examine those few unexplained threads. I believe that it is possible to discover their proper place in the tapestry of our life. Tobias Destrella, Historical Significance, First Edition.
By the end of the week, they were preparing a celebration. The jet would land in Barcelona and pick up Darin before continuing to Estolia. Both the king, Leon, and the keeper, Nico, discussed the arrival itself. In deference to their age, they agreed the most fitting place for Kedarin to meet her parents would be within the palace itself. Leon and Mary would greet the jet upon its arrival. For the journey to and from the airport, Leon chose the grand royal carriage, pulled by a full complement of 6 white horses. Once in the palace, to keep introductions to a minimum, Leon decided that only Zeke and Kedarin, Leon and Callie, and of course Mary and Darin would attend at first. The remaining members of the household would be introduced in due course. The jet was due to land around mid-morning. Earlier that morning, Darin's gorgeous Estolian stallion and a couple of other horses had been transported from the stables in Barcelona. While they waited for the jet's arrival, Mary enjoyed the chance to chat with Leon. Like many in Estolia, he seemed unconcerned with titles, even though he was the king.
Normally, we would have arranged for your grandparents to arrive at dawn. Dawn carries deep symbolism in our nation. But we had to balance tradition with practicality. In the end, it made more sense to allow them a full night's rest in Barcelona so they could arrive refreshed.
Estolia is really unique, isn't it?
She said. He smiled at that.
I spent a number of years in California. I found the outer world quite strange compared to how logically things are done here in Estolia.
I love it here,
she said with a soft sigh of contentment.
Nico tells me it's perfectly all right for me to spend time first learning to ride and then to study dressage. He says that since the conditions of my research grant stipulate I must use an Estolian exclusively, he can't object to the time I spend learning to ride. I'll begin my research into Estolia once I've completed 9 weeks of dressage lessons from Darin.
Nico is looking forward to spending time with you so that the two of you can put together a definitive history of Estolia,
Leon said.
Your whole family's spending a lot of time on me,
she pointed out.
We should,
he said.
You are bringing closure to Kedarin in a way she never expected. You will also fill a need we have by helping us write the history of our nation.
She flushed, unaccustomed to people taking pleasure in her company. More than once she had been told that she possessed tunnel vision, focusing on one thing to the exclusion of all else. The sleek private jet appeared, approaching the runway and landing with economy and grace. As it taxied towards them, her thoughts strayed to Estolia's peculiar dichotomy, eschewing motorized vehicles on the ground, yet maintaining several airplanes and helicopters. Turning to Leon, she said,
How strange that you have airports but no cars.
We have re-evaluated that decision every 30 years or so since motor cars became popular. Each new generation believes that what we have here on the island works. Why change it if it works? Our most recent major changes were adding a railroad in the late 1800s, and then adding the 2 airports and the few support ground vehicles necessary. We were grateful to be able to convert to wholly solar vehicles. Air transport has always seemed more critical to our needs than ground transport that would pollute our land and air.
I think it gives Estolia a certain charm,
she said.
There's definitely something special about it.
From her seat in the grand royal carriage, Mary watched as the jet taxied toward them across the runway. The carriage, drawn by 6 white horses, was large enough for her grandparents, Darin, Leon, herself, and the driver.
Shall we greet your grandparents properly?
Leon said. He climbed out of the carriage and offered his hand to guide her down the steps. Together they walked toward the jet, where ground crew were fitting the stairs into place. Mary watched as her grandparents descended carefully. They were vibrant people with, she hoped, 20 more years of solid life ahead, though age had taught them not to hurry. The moment their feet touched the tarmac, she ran to them and wrapped them both in a hug, overjoyed to see them.
Meredith, you're looking more beautiful and happier than I've ever seen you. Did you finally find yourself?
Her grandfather asked.
You know, Grandfather, I believe I have.
She grinned at him.
I'm so very glad you and Grandmother were willing to come out here. I'd like to introduce you to my companion.
Leon introduced himself by name only, choosing not to mention his titles. As her grandparents chatted with him, Mary's attention drifted, drawn unavoidably toward the third person descending the airstairs. She froze, staring at Darin in disbelief. She'd been drawn to him before, but attraction was far too small a word for what she felt now. If this was not love, she didn't know what love was. He was staring at her with a hunger that made her pulse quicken. Almost in a trance, she crossed the tarmac and looked up at him, but...
You're looking well, Darin,
she said. He caught her hands, drawing her a little closer, then glanced toward her grandparents and hesitated, as if the impulse to kiss her had just passed. Taking a steadying breath, he squeezed her hands and said,
You look quite well yourself, Mary. Estolia agrees with you.
Within 10 minutes they had climbed into the carriage and were heading back to the palace. Her grandmother glanced her way several times, noting how Darin held her hand. She had begged her grandparents to make the journey, but had not explained why. Her grandmother clearly believed she had asked them out because of a romantic attachment to Darin. A blush warmed her cheeks.
How are you and Kamchatka coming along?
Darin asked her. That was one topic she could talk about to the exclusion of all else.
I'm no longer sore at night after riding. I've been told I have a natural seat and light hands. I've also been told Kamchatka has an inherent gift.
I have received excellent reports about your progress. I am greatly encouraged by what I have heard. The abilities of the horse can only compensate for the inexperience of the rider to a certain point. I'm told that you learn with remarkable speed. By the time he is ready to compete in local dressage competitions, you will be ready as well.
Compete?
That startled her. He laughed easily.
There is something quite rewarding about being able to compete with others. We have a number of competitions here in Estolia, and there are additional ones, both in the Balearic Islands and in Spain. For now, we will just work on teaching you some of the basics.
Where exactly are we going right now?
Her grandfather asked. She turned her attention from Darin, still aware of the fact that he had her hand in his.
We're going to the palace.
Palace?
Her grandmother exclaimed. Mary's attention swiveled to Leon. The introductions earlier had failed to identify his role as king. In retrospect, his silence seemed deliberate. Leon answered with a faint smile.
Estolia, which your granddaughter is currently researching, is a most singular nation. We do not have a tourist industry, no hotels, and very few inns. There are only 2 places suited to house visitors. A villa in El Chixonia near our major airport in the northeast, and the palace itself here in the Amador region.
I am assuming that the king, if there is one, is okay with this?
Her grandfather asked dryly. Darin laughed, clapping Leon on the shoulder.
My cousin Leon is most humble. He does not like to make a great deal of it, but his introduction was a bit abbreviated. His full name and titles are Leonidas Agamemnon Zakarian, Duke, Sovereign and King of Estolia.
Mary was amused by the wash of colour on Leon's face.
They're very casual here in Estolia,
she added.
Your mother didn't know why you wanted us to come out so urgently. She wasn't surprised you didn't invite her, of course,
her grandmother said. Mary's mother was unlikely to ever fly out at a request from her. She was too busy, and none of Mary's passions were of interest to her.
Grandmother, grandfather,
She broke off, a blush warming her cheeks. She looked up at Darin, searching for words. He surprised her by leaning toward her and kissing her lingeringly. When he drew back, he smiled.
I imagine you'll explain in your own time,
her grandmother said. Mary caught the knowing glint in her grandmother's eyes and realized she had drawn the wrong conclusion, that Mary had urged them to come because of a romance with Darin. When she turned toward him, he was still watching her, his expression warm and possessive. He smiled softly and reached to caress her face. She did not even realize when she reached up and reciprocated, her fingers grazing his face. Only as the tactile memory flashed back did she register what she had done, how natural it had been, to touch him, and for him to touch her. Her gaze locked with his for a long moment. In his eyes, she recognized desire, and something more she could not yet name. When she finally looked away, she drew a sharp breath, only then realizing she had been holding it. Her attention shifted from the man who had just wordlessly declared his interest and met her grandmother's eyes. They shared a smile, the familiar warmth of it steadying her.
With one resounding call, clarity and vision, as obstacles fall, reveal the right decision. The serpentine path. All these compensations won't undo feeling stranded, rejected, unloved, abandoned, until these
The first graduating class for the Hallows End University was small, roughly 100 individuals who began at the university in that first year. The graduates sat upon the stage. I made it a point to leave one seat empty. Iris McGlennon was the only person who failed to graduate. Her photograph was on her empty chair. When I read the names of the graduates, I could barely get her name out intelligibly. I had to stop and swallow down the emotions clogging my throat before I could continue. Iris's loss was felt deeply by all who knew her. It seemed cruel in the extreme that she would show her aura to Cameron only hours before she was taken from us. I do not believe that I truly understood what it meant to be the delegate until the moment I learned of her death. For Cameron, the only purpose left in his life was to serve the needs of the project until Deity called him home to be with Iris again. Gideon Zakarian, Designate's Journal.
Good God!
Mary's grandfather exclaimed as they rounded the shoulder of Mount Estoliana. The massive palace atop Mount Zacharias came into view, cast in sharp relief by the early morning light. The sun now edged above the far ridgeline, its rays catching the Estolian flag as it fluttered from the highest tower. Mary remembered the awe she had felt 10 weeks earlier at that same site. It was one of the most impressive buildings she had ever seen.
If that isn't one of the largest palaces ever built, I'd be shocked,
her grandfather said. He was obsessed with the architectural wonders of the ancient world. He would be excited by many of Estolia's extraordinary edifices. A flood of pleasure warmed her heart. She would be bringing her grandparents their heart's desire, but even beyond that she knew they would enjoy their stay.
It is, in fact, one of the largest,
Leon responded.
But we prefer a low profile, and do not attempt to claim notoriety for our architectural wonders.
It is truly amazing,
her grandfather said.
Will I be allowed to tour the building?
Oh yes, absolutely. The palace, the cathedral, and even the temple if you wish.
Mary squeezed Darin's hand, her heart overflowing with the sweet anticipation of the joy she would soon bring her favorite relatives. For the rest of the journey, her grandfather and Leon discussed the palace and its architecture with engaged enthusiasm. As the carriage began the steep ascent up the palace road, Darren drew her closer, his arm settling around her shoulders. She leaned against him, listening to the beat of his heart. The rhythmic cadence of hooves and crunch of gravel filled the air as she tried to make sense of the shift between them. Her skin felt warm, alive, her thoughts strangely unfocused. These were new sensations, ones she couldn't sort or name. When she'd met him in Barcelona, she'd admired him, been drawn to him, but never imagined he might feel the same. Now, watching the way he carried himself with her grandparents and Leon, she thought, perhaps only imagined, that he was, in his quiet way, proclaiming it. The carriage finally reached the summit of the truncated mountain, where the fingers of stone rose around the palace like a protective hand, as if to keep it safe for millennia to come. In the short time she had been in Estolia, she had come to look forward to this part of the journey. The carriage swept around the wide ornamental pond, where orange and gold koi flashed through the clear water beneath the fountain's spray. They halted beside the twin switchback staircases that rose toward the palace's grand entrance.
"I'm more impressed than ever,"
her grandfather proclaimed. His eyes shone as he took in the tiers and terraces, the arches and columns, the rising towers that crowned the palace.
"It'll be an honor to stay here."
You were a bit short on details, my dear,
her grandmother said.
Our time is our own, but you didn't mention how long you'd like us to stay with you.
Mary answered without thinking.
I'd keep you here with me forever if I could.
Darren squeezed her shoulder and added,
It is our hope that you will consent to remain for a minimum of 3 weeks. There is an important ceremony in 1 week and another the following week. It would be best, we think, for you to remain through both. You are, of course, welcome to stay in Estolia for as long as your granddaughter is here. She will be granted a 5-year visa within the next fortnight, I have been told.
The carriage came to a halt and they climbed out. Leon glanced at the stairway, then turned to her grandparents.
I have learned never to make assumptions,
he said with a smile.
I will not presume you incapable of mounting the staircase. Would you prefer our elevator?
Her grandmother laughed softly.
We both believe staircases are essential to strong cardiovascular health. We'll manage the climb perfectly well.
As they approached the smaller chamber favored by the royal family, Mary felt her pulse quicken. The next few minutes would be critical. Her grandparents had no idea that Darren was their own flesh and blood, their grandson. She glanced at him and caught his lingering focus on her, unaware of what awaited him. Then she looked to Leon, and in the faint tightening of his expression saw the truth. Darren was every bit as unprepared as her grandparents. When they entered the room, Mary looked from Kedrin to her grandmother and saw how closely the two women resembled each other. Zeke stood with his arm around his wife, waiting to see how events would unfold. Her grandmother stopped short, her gaze fixed on Kedrin.
Earl,
she whispered, barely managing her husband's name. Mary said softly,
I found her, Gran.
The two women crossed the space between them and folded into each other's arms. Her grandfather joined them a heartbeat later, wrapping both women close, his eyes shut tight, a tremor visible in his jaw.
I do not understand.
Darren said.
It was your name.
Mary told him quietly.
It made me wonder if it was just a coincidence. My grandparents' baby was taken from the hospital right after birth. They never found her.
She drew a breath.
They searched for months, for years, trying to find their missing daughter.
Darren looked from her to the tearful reunion and turned ghostly white.
You are saying your grandparents are also my grandparents?
His voice cracked, the colour draining from his face. Leon stepped forward, motioning for Darren and Mary to sit, letting the reunion unfold in its own time. His voice carried a restrained intensity as he said,
When Mary was introduced to Kedaren, She reacted to her name in such a peculiar way that the truth came out almost instantly.
We are cousins?
He sounded disturbed.
No, Darin.
Leon was firm.
After Kedarin went missing, Carol Cicero could not have any further children. After 18 months of looking, they adopted Mary's mother, Molly, when her family were killed in a fire.
Mary watched the colour seep back into Darin's face and wondered why he had reacted so strangely to the idea that they might be related.
I wondered.
Darin said after he absorbed Leon's answer.
Why it was you insisted that I only introduce myself by the name of Darin Zakarian.
Leon smiled.
We wanted to be sure that the surprise was not spoiled. I am sorry you were not informed.
Darin looked at his parents, at the tears on his mother's face, at the joy suffusing the features of the older couple, and shrugged in acceptance.
I think it was the right choice. I might have treated them differently if I knew.
You did an excellent job of diverting their attention from their understandable curiosity,
Leon observed.
They were certain, by the time we got to the palace, that your interest in their granddaughter was the reason they were asked to fly out.
Darin glanced at Mary and smiled at her.
I was not trying to divert their attention. I wanted them to know how utterly fascinating I thought their granddaughter.
Mary blushed at that assertion. She looked at Darin, trying to see what he was saying. The message he was sending her with his eyes was hard to believe.
Now is not the time, Mary,
Darin said quietly.
But later this evening, you and I need to talk.
A few moments later, the older couple took their seats, with Zeke and Kedarin joining them. Leon introduced Callista, and servants moved gracefully through the room with tea.
I never understood why my cousin insisted that I use only my familiar name.
Darin said,
We named him after me, Kedarin Antiochus Zakarian.
Kedarin said, her voice rich with subtle nuances. Her eyes met those of her mother, and the unspoken message between them was profound, even if those watching were not quite privy to its meaning. For Mary, the morning shimmered with wonder as she watched joy transform her grandparents' faces. The only shadow in that golden hour had been Darin's reaction when he first learned of their connection, a look of almost horror crossing his features before relief softened them. Something Leon had said had clearly shifted his understanding. As conversation flowed, stories, laughter, the rediscovery of kin, Darin kept her hand enclosed in his, a quiet promise that his interest in her ran deeper than courtesy.
We would like to escort you to the suite we have set aside for you,
Zeke said to her grandparents.
It is in our personal wing of the palace. We hoped you would prefer that to being in one of the guest wings.
That would be perfect,
her grandfather said. Mary hugged her grandparents and, for good measure, hugged Kedarin and Zeke. As she embraced Zeke, he whispered in her ear,
Listen carefully to what Darin has to tell you.
She felt a blush warm her face at his words. She looked at him curiously, catching the sparkle of happiness in his eyes. She nodded, a blush rising to her cheeks. Leon and Callie stayed nearby, but moved to the far side where, within minutes, Callie's hands drifted over the piano keys, soft notes filling the space as Leon slipped an arm around her waist. Darin smiled at Mary and squeezed her hand, still clasped in his.
I am overwhelmed by the happiness you have brought my parents,
he said quietly.
You looked like it was the worst possible news,
she pointed out. He nodded, a serious expression on his face as he explained,
Estolia is a small nation, and nearly everyone here is a cousin of some sort. Because of such close family ties, one of the important guidelines we live by is that we must try to avoid marrying cousins who are too closely related. If we have the same grandparents, we would not be able to marry.
He had been declaring his interest in her from the moment they met up again.
Marriage?
She prompted him.
Marriage.
He was emphatic. His gaze dropped to where her hand rested in his. He drew it to his lips and kissed the back gently.
I do not wish to live without you, Mary. I have tendered my notice and moved back to Estolia, permanently.
To be with me?
She squeaked. She studied his face, visually tracing each familiar line and catching the subtle echo of her grandparents in his features.
Yes, Mary, to be with you.
He looked over to where Leon and Callie sat together before returning his focus to her.
My family knew of my interest.
His fingers tightened around hers and he inhaled deeply before saying breathlessly,
I plan to marry you the instant I can, the moment I can convince you to say yes.
She felt a reckless need to lock this man to her side.
I did not know, Darren, that it was possible to fall in love twice in one day, but the day I met you and Kamchatka, I felt as if my heart would burst. I knew Cam fell in love with me, and I thought I would have to accept only his love. I never thought you would also return my feelings.
It was mutual.
He pulled her close and kissed her softly. It was only as his hand on her ribs started to wander that another voice intruded.
I heard everything went okay.
Mary pulled back and saw that Nico and Kenzie had entered the room and were now sitting in the seats her grandparents had only just vacated. She flushed, remembering that Darren's hand had strayed to the lower curve of her breast just before the couple interrupted them.
It is a miracle that Mother was reunited with her birth parents.
Darren said,
I do not think that I have ever seen my mother this happy, except, perhaps, the time when the doctors said that Miracle was going to live.
Deity brings happiness to those deserving of it,
Nico stated solemnly.
Your mother, Darren, deserves the happiness that Mary has brought her. I am sure that her grandparents are also deserving of the joy they've been given on this day.
He looked from Darren to Mary, his voice shifting from soft and sentimental to hard and businesslike.
It would seem we need to have a discussion.
Mary remembered how passionate their kiss had become before this man and his wife entered the room. She wondered what Nico was going to say to them. Had she broken any taboos?
Mary,
Nico addressed her.
One of the things you will learn during your research is that Estolian men always marry when they are 30. The optimum day to marry is always exactly a week after the 30th birthday.
She felt a flush on her cheeks. Nico had not even been in the room when Darren first brought up marriage. How could he know that Darren had practically proposed just a few minutes ago?
Darren will be 30 in 1 week,
Nico stated. Darren had that hungry look on his face again.
I plan on marrying you, Meredith Palmer,
he said.
But you may not be alone with Mary until your birthday,
Nico said.
Of course. May I begin my elder year once Mary and I are married?
I was hoping you would ask to join the others,
Nico said.
I do believe that the men who are in their elder year right now are some of the most extraordinary individuals our nation has ever seen. Your voice and personal strength will only add to the synergy we have created.
Mary, we've had your stuff moved to our wing of the palace,
Kenzie said.
I'm hoping you won't mind spending time with me over the next week.
I don't mind,
Mary said, unsure what was happening.
Great.
Kenzie grinned.
You and Darren can go for a dawn ride the day before his birthday, but other than that, I'm afraid we're going to keep your time together pretty limited.
Feeling stranded, rejected, unloved, abandoned, until these revelations, whispered vows as day begun, as all their waiting defied temptation when it faded into one affirmation.
The greatest blessing an Estolian can experience is not faith in deity, it is faith in self. Faith that one can do hard things, be worthy of attention, and capable of overcoming obstacles. Faith in oneself is perhaps the hardest faith of all. Key. Inscription on Dragonstone.
The time spent with Darren, his parents and her grandparents was magic. The greatest gift she had ever received, or would ever give, was the reunion of her grandparents with their long-lost daughter. She could not imagine how they must feel, to lose Kedarin as an infant, and live more than 50 years having only the unfulfilled hope that their child was alive, healthy, and happy somewhere on the planet. Their happiness and joy were abundant. To Mary, her grandparents grew visibly younger as the joy of their reunion wrapped around their hearts. Mary learned that Kadarin's deepest sorrow throughout her life was the belief that her parents had abandoned her in that stable so long ago. She never outgrew the feeling that she was somehow less lovable, that something essential was missing. Because her history was unknown, she was never eligible for adoption. No one ever told her why, and she came to believe it was because she was defective and ugly. One foster father even told her outright that no one wanted a freckled carrot top for a daughter. When Kadarin discovered that her parents had never stopped wanting her, that they had cried themselves to sleep and celebrated her birthday every year of her life, the realization brought her a peace that seemed to shine from within. 3 days after Mary's grandparents arrived, a package came, a large scrapbook filled with the letters they had written to their missing daughter each year of her life.
Entwined beneath the newborn sun, whispered vows as day begun.
In the days that followed, as the drama between her grandparents and their daughter unfolded, Darin continued her dressage lessons. She and Kamchatka were learning how better to understand one another. Sometimes she only had to think what she wanted him to do, and he responded as if reading her mind. Darin explained,
For Kamchatka, and any Andestolian who forms such a bond, the joy you feel and the joy he feels are one and the same, and it is transcendent. The more in accord you are, the greater the joy becomes. If you asked him, he would die for you. There is only one living being of importance to him, and that is you. Nothing stands above that bond. He will defend you, protect you, and give his life for you. This is why we breed only those stallions who embody the highest qualities. Kamchatka.
He paused, swallowing hard, emotion tightening his voice.
Kamchatka is among the finest. With your consent, he will become one of the stars of our future breeding program.
Why does it make you so emotional?
She asked once she had dismounted.
Katydid and Chattanooga, his dam and sire, were paired because I believed they could create a foal of this quality. I was granted 3 years of Katydid's production. It is a rare satisfaction to see one's faith so fully validated.
If he's used as a stud, does this mean I won't get to ride him?
She asked. Riding Kamchatka was no longer just the means whereby she had acquired her grant. Now it felt as though the grant's true purpose had been to bring her to him.
He will be unavailable for several months of the year. You will be given another steed to ride when he is busy.
Given?
She asked, remembering Kamchatka's purchase price.
Given,
he insisted.
The stud fees alone will recompense you for the purchase price.
The evenings were spent with family. Darin often held her hand or pulled her close against him as they sat and talked as a family late into the night. They never spent time alone, except during the dressage lessons. Eloise served as their chaperone for the pre-dawn ride on the day before Darin's birthday. Mary rode Kamchatka, while Darin rode his own stallion, Galvan. They dismounted on the summit of the lesser mountain and tied both horses to the same low-slung tree. Kamchatka sidled close to Galvan, the two stallions nuzzling one another like old friends.
Why are they so friendly with each other?
She asked.
Kamchatka consents, in a simple way. What matters to you, Mary?
Darin explained.
He knows that I am special to you, and by extension, my stallion is as well. Part of the love bond these horses form is their instinct to accept those people and creatures that matter to their rider. Though...
He paused and sighed softly, patting the thick neck of his mount.
He has been mine since I was 12. I do not expect he will be around much longer.
Sirocco,
Mary said, naming one of the horses she had recently begun grooming. In that instant she knew this man would form an attachment to the feisty filly.
You think so?
He asked. A pang of guilt struck her for suggesting a new mount for him. It must be painful to face the end of such a long partnership. Her conflict must have shown, because he said,
Do not worry, Mary. Galvin and I are good friends, but he is old. He will enjoy retirement. Perhaps I will take the time to get to know Sirocco.
The vibrant colours of the sunrise still stained the megalithic basalt columns crowning the greater peak of Mount Estoliana. The brilliance was already beginning to mellow, fading into the clear light of morning. They had ridden up long before dawn, watched the first fire crest over the palace on Mount Zacharias, and now the world below was fully awake. She turned from the fading glow and asked,
What do I need to know, Darren?
He did not pretend to misunderstand her, for which she was grateful. He opened his arms to her, and she went to him without hesitation, finding calm only when she stood within his embrace.
You want to know what has been happening these last few days, and what will happen next?
He asked.
Yes.
Her voice trembled.
Nico said tomorrow is your birthday, and that a week after is the best day to be married. But I keep hearing hints, cryptic things, and it feels like there's something important I am not being told.
She winced, hearing her tone, the strain in her words, the note of rising panic at being left behind. She wanted the truth. She wanted him, to be his, to know he would be hers. Her grandparents deserved this time, years perhaps, to remain with their long-lost daughter through the twilight of their lives. And she, Mary realized, deserved something as well, the reward of keeping this man beside her for the rest of her days.
There is much you will need to learn about Estolia.
He eased back just enough to meet her eyes, his expression turning somber.
We as a nation are simple. We live and die by our faith.
He drew a breath.
What I need to know, Mary, is whether you are willing to embrace my faith, my nation, and my way of life. Are you willing to live here in Estolia, with me, for the rest of your life? Will you marry me and bind your life to mine irrevocably?
While he spoke, he did not pause for her to answer any of his questions. She could hear her heartbeat pulsing in her ears. His body betrayed his desire, the hard line of his arousal pressed against her through the thin fabric between them. She struggled to gather her thoughts, to form the words she needed to say.
I fell in love with you, Darren, when I first met you.
She whispered.
Of course I'll marry you.
He sighed and looked away briefly before meeting her gaze again.
In our faith, the marriage takes place a full week after the beginning of the honeymoon. If you are willing to take me on, I will be permitted to be alone with you tonight, Mary.
Some of the veiled comments she had heard up until this point in time suddenly made sense. He would be allowed to be alone with her, so that he could claim her, physically. He tilted her chin upward and kissed her, his hips pressing closely into her body, rubbing against her nerve endings, stimulating her imagination. As the passion of their kiss began to escalate, Eloise interrupted them to say cheerfully,
Now that the sun is up, we need to return to the stable.
Darren pulled away slightly, his forehead resting against hers, his lips curved in a smile. His eyes meeting hers were full of promise for the future.
Defied temptation when it faded into one affirmation. You showed me trust, a sweet elation, how faith can build up my relation, a whispered dream, our new foundation. I found my faith in our conversation.
When I was assigned my inspection duty in the temple, I was given a copy of the record kept by the acolytes who came before me. The august acolytes in our year were assigned the myriad corridors and regions of the labyrinth. We were told at the time that the inspections were less frequent in that region, partially due to the less frequent traffic the labyrinth received. 3 days after I began, I noticed a note scribbled into the margin of the record. A note I have never forgotten, for it read, "When Zacharias made his promise to Deity, we, the children of Zacharias, inherited more than this land. We fell heir to the character traits so predominant in our founder. This is why so few Estolians stray from the pathway of faith. This is also why we, as Estolians, are set apart from the rest of humanity. We were forever changed by the touch of Deity in the lives of Zacharias and Estoliana." Lazarus Ezekiel Zacharian, Capitulo 88.
Mary was relaxing in a luxurious bubble bath when she heard a tap on the door. After only a brief hesitation, Kenzie entered the bathroom and asked her,
"How are you doing?"
Mary felt strange having a conversation while she was naked in the tub. She was glad that the bubbles were piled high.
I'm doing fine.
Kenzie pulled over a chair to sit down.
"Did you and Darren speak during your ride to watch the sunrise?"
Mary blushed. She remembered the press of his hard thighs against her own, the implication that tonight he would claim her.
"You did?"
Kenzie surmised.
"Do you have any questions?"
Mary studied the rainbow-haired woman, not sure what to say. She said. She stalled out, not sure how to express what she'd learned or how she felt about it. Kenzie chuckled softly.
"You know, Mary, I felt just like you when I came here."
I thought you were Estolian.
Mary said with a frown.
"No, I'm from California."
She grinned at Mary.
Where did you meet Nico?
Mary asked.
"Los Angeles International Airport."
Kenzie said promptly.
"He saw me and fell in love with me instantly."
She chuckled, adding,
"I've never heard of any nation so dedicated to the notion of love at first sight."
I fell in love with Darren when I first saw him.
Mary admitted shyly.
"Of course you did, Mary."
Kenzie's tone was matter-of-fact.
"I fell in love with Nico the moment I saw him. Deity has a way of channeling our emotions, helping us recognize them quickly, so we can spend our time together instead of just dating. I was glad I only had a week between meeting Nico and beginning our seclusion together."
Mary blushed at the blatant message she was receiving.
It wasn't nearly that fast for Darren and me.
"Of course not. Mary, you had to first reunite his parents and your grandparents. Now that they're together, you and Darren can finally explore your own connection. It's like a fairy tale story."
Mary looked at the woman sitting casually in her bathroom, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She felt stiff and artificial beside her. Some of her unease must have reached Kenzie, because she frowned slightly and leaned forward.
"What is it, Mary?"
she asked softly. Her deepest fear could not be contained.
It won't last.
"What won't?"
He'll realize he's made a mistake,
she asserted. Her deepest fear spilled into the open. None of her boyfriends had lasted more than 1 or 2 dates. They'd all said the same thing about her, that she was boring, brittle, unemotional, unexciting.
"Do you think you've made a mistake, Mary?"
Kenzie asked gently.
I know I haven't,
she answered quickly. She'd never felt so sure of anything as she had since telling Darren how she felt.
Darren is everything I've ever wanted, and he's even.
She broke off at the words that almost escaped.
"Even what? More than you deserve? More of everything?"
Mary was stung. Kenzie knew how little she could give to Darren.
Right,
she agreed, the sting of impending tears closing her throat and stifling any further words.
2 days before I met Nico, my fiancé told me he couldn't marry a fat circus freak.
Kenzie said.
I was convinced I would live my life alone and be happy with myself.
Mary stared at the woman next to the tub, amazed.
But you're gorgeous,
she said.
How could anyone call you fat or a circus freak?
Kenzie's smile was brilliant.
Nico never saw me that way, and because he doesn't, I don't see myself that way either.
But I'm not glamorous or sophisticated,
Mary said.
I study history.
You're right. That's not glamorous or sophisticated.
Kenzie agreed.
You study history. He breeds horses. I'm pretty sure my husband is telling him how right you are for him, how right he is for you. I bet he thinks you couldn't be interested in a man who works with animals.
But why?
Mary felt amazed at the thought.
How could he think he's anything other than perfect?
How can you think that?
Kenzie responded.
But...
Mary broke off, trying to piece together what Kenzie meant. After a moment, she said slowly,
You're saying he doesn't see in himself what I see in him, and the same is true with me?
If you cannot yet have faith in yourself,
Kenzie said softly,
then have faith in your opinion of him. You believe he is right for you. Hold to that. Believe in that. The rest will come.
Mary wasn't sure it made sense, but she nodded anyway. She closed her eyes, drew a slow, steady breath, and let it out again. After a pause, she asked,
What will happen?
Tonight, you have two choices. You can choose Darren outright, or you can just let him seduce you. If I were you, Mary, I'd choose him. That's much easier.
What's the difference?
If you're willing to have faith in him, and in yourself, and agree to be his, then we'll escort you to the temple, where the two of you will spend a week getting to know one another. There will be no horses, parents, or grandparents to get in the way. It will just be the two of you.
And if I don't have that kind of faith?
Then he'll try to seduce you anyway,
Kenzie said, a wicked grin lighting up her beautiful features. She remembered the feel of his body pressed close to her, his hips hard up against hers, his lips on her own. The thought sent a tremor through her, half fear, half yearning. She wanted to believe they could be right for each other. Kenzie stood up and smiled at her.
I'll leave you to finish your bath. Think about what I've said.
Truth unfolding where no witness lies, no vow, no fear, only pulse and trust, the sacred trembling between I and us.
Bird cadence stirs. I find the strength to face love and life, my revelations. By faith, I'm led to grace through their wise remonstration. Egyptian statues, fiery eyes held wide.
I recall reading Kenzie's ensayo for the first time, her account of our meeting. I found her description of me as an 11 on the male Richter scale of good looks quite amusing. In later years, after gaining some weight, I'd have struggled to imagine anyone seeing me that way. But Kenzie insists it's not the inches around my waist that draw her in. It was always my dimples, the way they captured her heart. Nicodemus Luciano Zakarian, Capitulo 89.
Darren studied Nico's dark good looks, wondering how Mary could choose him when he fell so far short of the classic tall, dark and handsome ideal. He wished keenly to be attractive enough that Mary's interest in being his Kaylee would be assured. Part of him wanted to avoid this evening entirely, to forego the honor of giving his soul into her keeping on this night. Deep down, he expected she would prefer someone more handsome, sophisticated, someone who surpassed him in looks, in refinement, in everything.
Zeke requested the royal seclusion suite for you,
Nico said. His dimples deepened as he grinned, adding lightly,
I was going to give you that luxury no matter what, of course.
I think...
Darren began.
Do not think!
Nico interrupted him. His grin was gone.
Feel, experience, act, do not think. The Spirit has confirmed your choice. Your union will be sanctioned. Accept the influence of Deity in your life. Accept that you saw Mary's aura because Deity knows she is right for you and that you are right for her. Anything else means you deny Deity, the Spirit, and your faith.
Darren's head jerked back. He felt like he had been punched. Nico's expression was furious, his eyes cold. Darin realized in that moment what it was he had almost denied. Nico was right to chastise him. He felt a sick wrench in his gut. What if his doubts had somehow made him ineligible to take part in the greatest blessings of the Estolian Way? But then Nico's expression softened, and he gave Darin a lopsided grin.
"My job can be difficult,"
Nico said wryly.
"I know that you believe in Deity, in the faith, in the promise of Zacharias. What you need to do is learn to believe in the Estolian Way with the same level of faith. You and Mary are right for one another. I promise that you will believe before the sun rises."
Darin was holding his breath, and he let it out slowly, taking several deep breaths before nodding. Nico grinned happily and leaped to his feet.
"I will have the acolytes prepare the seclusion suite. You and Mary really should choose to go there from the start."
Darin would invite Mary to accompany him to the seclusion suite, and if she was willing, he would spend a full week doing everything within his power to convince her that he was the right man for her. If she was not convinced, then he deserved what would end up happening, but he would leave the future to fend for itself. He had this evening to get through first. After Nico left, Darin looked at his reflection in the mirror. He was trying to decide whether the outfit he chose was really the right thing to wear, or if he should change into something more or less formal. He was still dithering when a tap at his door preceded its swinging open. It was his father.
"Nico spoke with you?"
he asked without preamble. Darin grimaced at the memory of their interview. His father's expression made it clear he already knew what had taken place. Before Darin even realized he was going to ask the question, he blurted out,
"Has Deity ever?"
He paused. Finishing the thought felt perilously close to doubt.
"No, Darin,"
Zeke replied, answering the unspoken question as surely as if Darin had voiced it aloud.
"Deity would not indicate you and Mary were right for one another and then take it back. The greatest purpose we have in this world, as we are refined for Tarazan, is to make mistakes and learn from them. You please Deity by being willing to learn."
Darin swallowed down the tears that threatened to surface. From the time he was a small boy, his father was one of the wisest men in their entire nation, proving yet again that it was true. Most Estolians were blessed by their family connections and place in the nation, but he, Antiochus Kedarin Zakarian, was more blessed than any other man for the family that was his, and for the way he so steadily received guidance in his life. The proud smile on his father's face drew a nod of acknowledgement. It was time for him to embrace his future, Meredith. When Mary joined them in Nico and Kenzie's dining room, Darin felt the rush of blood to his face and other parts of his anatomy. She was everything he ever wanted in his future wife and more. He crossed the room to her, his eyes fixed on hers, his senses full of her presence. The Mayberry perfume on her skin, the shimmer of her aura dancing around her like a halo of fire.
"Meredith Palmer, please tell me that you are going to marry me, be mine, not only for now, but forever."
If that is what you want, Darin,
she said softly. Nico and Kenzie guided them towards the front entrance of the palace. Stars were already twinkling in the night sky. It was later than he thought. He and Mary followed the other couple down to the carriage waiting in the forecourt. Once the carriage started moving, Darin's senses took in everything. Mary's perfume and the warmth of her hand clasped in his. The tang of Mayberry bark from the trees scattered along the palace road. The cool breeze against his face. The jangle of harnesses from the 4 carriage horses. The measured cadence of their hooves. A rippling noise like wind in sails whispered above, followed by a tingling in his ears. Overhead, the starlit outlines of bats winged past. Mary squeezed his hand and asked,
where are we going?
"To the temple,"
he said.
"To the seclusion suite, so we can spend a week together."
Mary leaned against Darin as the carriage wound down the switchback road toward the temple. Below, the valley stretched between the 2 mountains. The cathedral windows gleamed like fire, and she noticed how its position never blocked the temple's entrance for those on Mount Zacharias. The large eyes of each cat statue glowed with bright yellow and red light that fluttered. Each cat's simulated pupils were enormous emeralds in daylight. She wondered if flames highlighted each eye, or if it was a technological invention. Regardless, watching those glowing eyes made something stir within her as they descended the mountain. The Switchback Palace Road was well lit, but it remained a dark night. She was so focused on the glowing eyes of the cat statues that she lost track of their purpose and destination. Only when the carriage came to a sudden halt did she realize they had reached the temple. Nico helped Kenzie out of the carriage, and then waited while Darin climbed out and followed his example to help Mary out of the carriage.
"Another time?"
Nico said, as he escorted them up the shallow steps to the large wooden doors.
"I will give you a tour of the temple. For now, I believe that the best course of action is for the two of you to go direct to the seclusion suite."
Mary felt dazed as she and Darin followed the other couple, her senses already tuning out the surroundings in anticipation of being alone. She barely registered the young men holding doors, the polished tiles of the foyer, or the glimpse of a ceremony room before they were at another set of double doors, which Nico and Kenzie held open for them. After those doors closed, they were finally alone together. Once she realized she was alone with Darin, she felt shy. Was it possible he could be interested in her? She looked away from him, seeing the luxury of their surroundings, particularly a glass wall across from where they were standing. It was very late, and the darkness outside made the glass act like a mirror. She could see their reflection, standing side by side. A wave of peace settled over her heart and soul, and she knew a deep sense of contentment as her earlier insecurities just seemed to melt away. Fancifully, she felt as if she could see destiny swirling around them, like bright maple leaves dancing in a fall New England breeze. His eyes met hers in the reflection, and he pulled her close before turning to look at her directly.
"Meredith, I am in awe of the person that you are. You are beautiful."
No more beautiful than you are.
She asserted, breathless.
What happens next?
He led her to a small dining room on their right. She followed him to a beautifully laid-out meal on a semicircular table. He pulled out her chair for her, and she smiled at him before sitting down. Everything she loved about him became more pronounced during the course of the meal. By the time they were done eating, it seemed to be a natural segue for him to lead her to the bedchamber and slowly undress her. A heated surge of desire enveloped them, spiraling from gentle arousal to tempestuous passion. Mary felt as if she could have answered the most esoteric questions about the purpose of life by the time they were breathing heavily in one another's arms. Her purpose of life was exactly what she had experienced with Darin, a lifelong relationship that would, if she could believe the way they spoke about it, transcend both death and time itself. Once his breathing was even and measured, like the heartbeat in her ear, she sat up slightly and looked at him. The lights were still on in the bedchamber, and she was glad.
Do you really plan to spend eternity with me, even though I'm boring?
She asked softly.
"You are anything but boring,"
he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face.
"And yes, Mary, I hope to spend every moment granted to me in this life and in Torrizon by your side, getting to know you."
I find the strength to face love and life, my revelations by faith. I'm led to grow.